and gentlemen, welcome back to Digital Housing 2020. We're continuing our keynote conversation, and I'm very happy to be joined by William Mahfood, chairman of Wisynco Group, leading Jamaica manufacturer. I won't go into his resume, guys. You can go on the site and pay attention to it. I want to just jump into our conversation quickly.
Sure.
Thank you for agreeing to speak at Digital Housing, and I'm looking forward to the conversation.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to be here. I know you've had some interesting discussions already today, so hopefully at the end of the day, I don't bore anybody.
No. I think your perspective would be invaluable, especially from the manufacturer's perspective. I'm going to kind of pick up quickly because there's something that I learned. I knew that Wisynco was distributing St. Mary's.
Yes.
But I didn't realize that you're also a partner in that business.
Correct. So over the last, and I want to go back to maybe like the mid-90s when we started really getting into the distribution business. What we found was that as we built brands, there was this decision by many brand owners to just move quickly. Right. And for some reason, we realized that at that point, strategically, if we didn't have some level of control over brands, we would end up one day just basically working for people and they would control our destiny. So, we started in 1996 with the manufacturing of Bigger,
right, then
water, and we moved subsequently into a number of other beverages. And so we also identified, a lot of people don't realize, but the Cran water originated from our distribution arrangement at the time with Ocean Spray. And as we built the Ocean Spray business in Jamaica, it was one of the top countries in the world for Ocean Spray cranberry. When they decided to move the business, at that point we said, going forward, we had to do things that we had some level of control over. So one of the first acquisitions that we looked at, the family looked at, was at the Tradewinds. We acquired 50% of that business, right, and that gave us not only the ability to influence their product development and innovation, but also the distribution through Wisynco. We've subsequently done investments in Worthy Park, right, and then St. Mary's recently. So St. Mary's, we've taken a 30% stake. This is now through Wisynco, the public company. And we're helping them manage to develop, innovating in terms of the portfolio, as well as taking the distribution and just leveraging our distribution strengths to grow the St. Mary's brand locally.
Wonderful. You are, given these investments, you have a unique vantage point from which you see what is happening in the Jamaican economy.
Yes.
We see what is happening with COVID. What is your outlook for the next 24 months for the Jamaican and the Caribbean economy as a whole? Because I know that there's a big export component of Wisynco.
So one of the things we are really now looking at aggressively, as a matter of fact, over the last 24 hours, I've been talking to our operations people because we right now, most of our UK production is actually done in the UK. Under a license agreement, and we're bringing 100% of that back to Jamaica. Wonderful. So the production will originate here in Jamaica. Our exports have grown, really well over the last couple of years. We've found new partners who have done a good job in many markets, including Trinidad. But in the US, Canada, and the UK, we've seen tremendous growth. And so for us, the exports is one component of it. But as we've grown, one of the things that we realize is another big component for us was always the value added here in Jamaica. Right. So we're also very, very committed to agriculture and agro-processing. And you'll see strategically sort of where our head is. Tradewinds just announced acquisition of a new farm. Yes. They've taken over another 1,500 acres of land which we're going to use for sugarcane. Right. We have just acquired the old Jamaica beverage business, which was Citrus Growers Association, which has dairy manufacturing, where Tradewinds is also actively going into dairy. So we are moving in a direction that is going to start looking at, one, replacing a lot of the imported products. Yeah. So agro-processing and manufacturing to conserve foreign exchange in the country. Replace or displace some of those imported products, and then the export. So the combination hopefully will save the country, give us better food security locally,
Sure.
and then hopefully employ more Jamaicans and help the economy. As far as the economy is concerned, the risk that we face is twofold.
Yeah.
One big component of our economy is based on tourism, and I think we're seeing moves internationally that are going to benefit Jamaica, and some of those, for example, yesterday American Airlines announced that they're going to start pre-testing for people coming to Jamaica.
Right.
So basically tourists will be able to get tested as they get on the plane, and they'll be able to come here and be free, not to have to quarantine. Similarly, Jamaican residents coming home, they'll be able to travel back and forth now a little bit more freely. Give them a sense of confidence through the testing programs that airlines will offer, which hopefully will impact positively. And I think if we don't get tourism back up and running, the real importance of tourism is being felt at many levels in the society.
Right.
And there's a big debate on social media
Yes.
about what percentage of our economy is really tied to tourism. But I know, because I can see, for example, like in Montego Bay and the Grill,
Right.
the discretionary income that consumers would spend down there, maybe not necessarily people who are directly employed to the tourism sector, but taxi drivers and the people, tour guides and whatever, those people have been impacted by the lack of tourists in the country.
Sure. For a lot of ordinary Jamaicans, a barometer of how well we are doing is the exchange rate.
Yeah.
Who put this here? Is the exchange rate. Are we too fixated on the exchange rate? As a manufacturer is buying a lot of, I'm sure some of your imports are coming from overseas. Are we too fixated? Is there something else that we should be focused on?
Well, I mean, it's a supply and demand situation. Ultimately, the country requires so much foreign exchange for, our number one single consumption item is fuel. Mm-hmm. The fuel that powers all the cars on the road, and that powers a lot of the energy that we consume, through JPS, etc. After that, it's, what do we consume that we have to import? So like in the poultry industry, for example, almost 100% of the inputs come from overseas. We don't grow locally any of the inputs like corn or soybean or any of the grains that go into the processing. So as a country, if we don't find a balance between what our needs are for foreign exchange and what we earn, we're going to have a problem. Now, over time, what we've seen is change in consumer habits.
Right.
100% of soft drinks, not 100, but 70% of soft drinks and beverages used to be imported into the country.
Right.
And with investments by Grace Kennedy, by Lasco, by Wisynco, by Pepsi, what you've seen is a move where, now maybe less than 10% of our beverages that are consumed locally are imported. So more of that is happening. You see more expansion in agro space. NCB doing a huge investment in agriculture. A number of other companies are really focusing on that. That will over time, that will displace the need for imports, which will hopefully get us to the point where we find a balance,
Sure.
So I'm not as hooked up on the exchange rate.
Right.
I think what we need to do is we need to find where are the flows coming into the country with foreign exchange. Its remittances is about 30%.
Right.
Tourism is probably 30%, and then a lot of the rest would come from traditional or non-traditional agriculture, bauxite, etc.
In 2017, Wisynco did one of the biggest capital raises for a manufacturing business in the Caribbean.
Yeah.
However, Wisynco has been a big brand, a big name in Jamaica. Conceivably, you had other options. You could have done it privately. Why was the IPO an important mechanism?
So, a couple of things, and I'll give you, first of all, for me, and one of my greatest motivators was, in 2016, we had a big fire. I don't know if you recall.
Yes, I recall.
So May 2016, we had this huge fire, and I think a lot of our competitors felt this was going to be the downfall of Wisynco. By the following year, we had recovered fully. We were even bigger and stronger. And 100% of that is really due to the efforts of our team members, the people at the managerial, executive, and at the ground level, the grassroots people in Wisynco who work tirelessly to get us back up and running. And I said, well, the surest way to keep these people happy is to give them ownership in the company. So one of the things that we did was we did the IPO in I think it was December 2017. What we did was we had about 1,800 employees, and we offered them shares in the company at a 10% discount to the IPO. So we had a widespread take-up. Over 1,000 employees took up shares. We actually advanced funds from bonuses and stuff for them to buy into it, and so. So and I said to all, we had team, town hall meetings with the team members, and I would go to them and say, look, when the time comes that we have an annual general meeting, and as your chairman, I stand up to give you the report, you can ask the questions. Yes. Why didn't did we get more dividends, or why didn't we grow the revenue fast, or whatever? Yeah. But it gives them now a real sense of ownership. So that was the primary reason. Sure. And then secondary was the timing in the market was good. We did have a number of shareholders. It was a exclusively family-held company, and there were a number of family members who just wanted to start to realize the value and unlock some of that value.
Sure. I want to take you way back, because Wisynco's story is phenomenal, from the distribution of rice and all of that in the early days.
You could find information about that?
Oh, I'm a student of business, so I know. So talk to us a little bit, because a lot of emerging businesses are there that are starting very small. And what has led to that trajectory, and what do you think is the important things that your family, yourself, and the entire leadership of Wisynco has learned from where you started downtown distributing rice to where you are now?
It's funny, I was just talking to Andrew, our CEO, a while ago on the phone, and that's why I was a few minutes late. And we're talking about, the youngsters, like my son is now 30, and he's coming up. He started in one of our subsidiaries. Andrew has 2 sons, and he has a daughter who works in Tradewinds, and 2 sons who are just finishing their CPA. Okay. And, after 30 years, one of the things that I realized is that there's no greater way to learn business than to actually practice it every day. Okay. I mean, you could read all the books in the world, but when you're actually on the ground, in my case, I grew up in the warehouse and in the distribution center. I built a lot of the systems that today are the cornerstone of the company. Andrew was in finance and treasury, so he was very, very much fixated on how do we manage on the financial side. But we got to the point where, going from rice, there was certain things that we said we had to be strategically aligned, in terms of what our focus was. We realized, early in the day that styrofoam, which used to be a big part of our business, gave us a competitive advantage because of freight. Right. Beverages similarly also gave us a competitive advantage, because when you ship in water, the cost to ship it is very expensive. And so we could compete locally manufactured and build brands, through distribution and consumer engagement. And so we identified, those categories. Then we started to innovate, and we got into Cran Water, we got into Boom Energy Drink, and a number of other products that have been truly successful. But when I do speak to young entrepreneurs, which I do a lot, I tell them, focus on your strengths and your core. Identify what you're good at, and really become the best at it. Yeah. If you think about a guy like Jeff Bezos, look at the business that he had. The biggest business, second biggest business in the world today in terms of market cap. Right. But he started selling only books on a website, and then he grew it into this conglomerate of a business. Right. We started with bigger soft drinks, and then we added water, and then we added Boom and so forth. Right. And similarly, what we've seen is our core strengths are just growing our distribution, and then supplementing that with the manufacturing.
Do you see distribution as Wisynco's, because everybody, well, certainly
people think of Wisynco as manufacturing.
Sure.
But the truth is, we're really a distribution company.
Right.
And the components that make Wisynco strong, that really make us almost impenetrable, are the fact that we have our brands that we manufacture. So the trade winds products like True Juice and Worthy Parks, you know, the sugar and the rums, St. Mary's snacks. So that's a ring fence to protect the business from outside competition, because or from somebody saying we don't want you as a distributor anymore.
Right.
So today, we do a lot of licensed manufacturing as well, like Coca-Cola and their brands. But at the end of the day, those brands in our portfolio are also ring fenced, because if tomorrow morning Coke said we want to move the production to Trinidad, which it used to be,
right,
they wouldn't be able to compete in Jamaica anymore.
Right.
So we have that advantage through the manufacturing.
Amazing. You have recently entered the beer market, which is
about to.
about to.
The first shipments are on the wharf, I think.
Right, which is in Jamaica. Well, we know what happened with Heineken buying Red Stripe,
right.
Juggernaut of a company.
Yeah.
Why?
I love juggernauts. I look at them and I think, imagine there's only one guy in that business.
Yes.
So, and it's big enough that I think, ultimately, all of these industries that have, like if you look at our water business, for example, when we entered the water market in 2002, there was really only Catherine's Peak.
Right.
But Catherine's Peak didn't have the brand recognition, the wide availability. If you look at the beer market in Jamaica, beer is totally underserved as a category. Let me give you a context. So,
Sure.
Soft drinks in 1996, when Bigger started, the total market for soft drinks, ready-to-drink beverages in package, whether cans, glass, or plastic, was about 6 million cases a year. Today, that market is probably 50 million cases. So the exponential growth and the stimulation of the various companies that have come into the market, brands like Lasco, brands like the Pepsi brands and Bigger, etc., have stimulated the market. The same thing is going to happen with beer.
Sure.
Now, Red Stripe and Heineken may be the biggest beneficiary of that type of growth, because they're the market leaders.
So you're helping them.
But I only want, as the market grows for beer, I only want maybe
10%
or 15% of it.
Wonderful.
Until one day we can beat them with distribution.
Sure. Wonderful. You think they're how worried do you think they are?
To be honest with you, I think Heineken has a strong footprint in Jamaica with the brands. Red Stripe is a powerful brand. So I don't think I would be worried if I was them. Not too much.
You guys have been wonderful at picking brands, but also investing heavily in how you market,
right,
how you build the brand. Point Global is a marketing and branding firm.
Right.
We look, I can tell you, I study everything that comes out of Wisynco, all the campaigns that you do, how you build them, how your team builds them. We worked a little bit on digital with Calico Jack, True Juice, and some of your other brands.
Right.
And we have always loved how innovative and how strong how important is that to your overall distribution, your overall manufacturing?
Well, in this day, especially now when people are sheltered, and the social side of social media is far more important. The electronic side, especially, because how do you engage with consumers? There's no parties, there's no events. So on the electronic side, we are now trying to figure out, even more, how do we use that and leverage a strategy to build on that. There's no question. I'm not on Instagram, I'm not on Facebook. I leave that to the younger generation. And I realize that, if you look at the young people today, because I have, my children are in your age group, so I watch my 24-year-old daughter, she's actually working from home now, but she lives in New York City. And I watch her and how she works and how she interacts with her friends. And there is so much for young people to garner from the electronic media that we are. I think in Jamaica we're really just starting to scratch the surface. I think there's tremendous opportunity.
What type of investment needs to happen? What type of corporate leadership as well as government support needs to happen for us to really understand and use digital better?
So the first thing, and actually, one of the things that I know there is a lot of, I think in the near future you'll hear a lot of stories and noise about it. We need to have much better infrastructure in terms of internet in Jamaica. There's really only two players, and between the two players, the inconsistency of supply is tragic.
Right.
And we cannot become a digital, led economy without having that infrastructure.
Right.
People would say 15 years ago or 10 years ago that Jamaica was far advanced in terms of our technology. But what has happened is the capital investment has not kept pace with the demand and the growth in the consumption.
Right.
So that's an area, and as I said, I think in the next 2 years you'll hear a lot of excitement about investment in that area.
Sure.
And then beyond that, I think we have to, put in the hands of the young people as much technology as possible, because the digital age. I mean, you're talking, people approaching us now about laptops for students and tablets and all of this, and our kids here, especially in this time, if they don't have access to that technology and to the ability to learn, to maintain at a pace that the kids in other countries are,
right,
we're going to fall behind, and it will be a terrible disaster for the country if that happens.
Sure. There are 600,000 students in Jamaica.
Right.
I know the distribution to schools is a huge part of your business.
Yeah.
How big has the COVID impact? Is it that parents are still buying, or as a school business and the fall off in the school business affected your overall ability to?
No. So if you look at Wisynco, and if you were to break it down in terms of the channels that we sell to, our like hotel business would represent about 13% of our revenue. Schools is about 5% of our revenue. So schools are a very, very big component. We're probably, prior to COVID, the only company that had a dedicated school team of salespeople that, we service over 600 schools directly. And, as we expanded the portfolio, we had snacks, we had beverages, we had novelties like, ice cream sticks and all of those kind of things. And so we became really relevant in the schools for their snacks and consumption. So we saw a huge hit. And what happened is, at home, the house parents, mothers, whatever, are not buying the same type of products to give the kids. So where they would buy the lunchbox, little Tetra Pak drinks, those are not, because now at home they're mixing something,
and throwing it in a cup or something,
or whatever, right? So we're finding different consumption patterns at home than we normally would. Like water sales are slightly down over the last few months during COVID, and we're seeing increases in areas like soft drink.
Okay.
And it's hard to understand, but I mean, through research and stuff, we're starting to see some of the indicators of what's driving that.
Sure. Jumping back to marketing, when your brand teams come and they pitch an idea, as marketers we love selling an idea.
Yes, I know.
What lens, from where you're sitting, how do you evaluate the effectiveness of that idea? Because one of a lot of marketers watch digital housing for that kind of insight. What do I need to convince you as a C-suite person?
Historically, I would I guess maybe because I was much more in touch with what was happening in terms, in the social scene. I would look at it and say whether or not I thought it resonated with the consumers at the time. But as we have grown and we've gotten bigger now, I'm much more inclined to say I wanted to focus groups.
Right.
So if we have an idea that we're pitching, or a package design, or a promotion, or whatever, I would say to them, well, I want to say who is our consumer group. Go to the people, even internally if we have to, and give me a focus group to say, do you like the package? Do you like the promotional idea? Do you like the creative and so forth? Because I guess maybe I'm not in my own mind. I might think I'm still relevant, but I'm no longer relevant. as far as the younger people and consumption is concerned.
Sure. So you the belief in kind of empirical evidence
As
kind
much as possible, yeah.
Wonderful.
I don't shoot from the hip as much as I used to.
Just in terms of leadership, stepping away from marketing a little bit, how do you lead your team? What are some of the things that are important for you from your personal value
Right.
in leading?
So at Wisinko, we speak about the values of the organization are in a word called CHIRP, and it stands for compassion, humility, integrity, respect, and passion. And when I do speak to our teams, I usually focus on humility. And one of the reasons is because I think over time, and even with my own family, over time I think the values of humility, understanding how to listen to people, the compassion then comes in. If you see issues or needs that people have, that's when compassion kicks in. But it's a humility to be able to really understand what people's needs are, listening to them. And that, because marketing people especially, leaders a lot of the time, they sometimes develop a sense of arrogance.
Yeah.
And when you become arrogant, you no longer can understand or hear, your peers or even people, who are supposed to be, coming up through the ranks that you want to try and develop or whatever. You stop listening to those people. And so for me, the biggest leadership advice, I would give any young business leader is, first of all, ensure that you listen before you talk, and try and no matter how successful you become, if you have arrogance, you'll always falter.
Let's talk a little bit about business model,
Right.
And investment in business model. You're as a big manufacturer, but also a big distributor. How do you evaluate? I know I run a tiny business
Right.
compared to Wisinko, and I'm bombarded by people trying to sell me
Right.
a technology, send me a solution. How do you filter and make decisions around how you deploy, whether manufacturing technology,
Right.
or just any technology or any new system of operation in your business?
So, like right now, for example, we're going through, we've got 2 consultants working full-time with us looking at ERP solution. And we've gone through a process of ruling out, we were looking at SAP, Microsoft Dynamics, and then Oracle. And so we basically have narrowed it down to one, and we're now in the sort of this. There's a phase they call it where it's discovery,
Right.
where they now go in and they look at all components of the business with a fine-tooth comb and come back and tell us exactly what our needs are going to be. That the investment is a huge investment because it is really taking us to that next stage where. In our brief when we sat down with the consultants, we said, these are some of the outcomes we want in the next couple of years. This is our 2-year, 5-year, 10-year kind of vision, whether or not we can achieve all of these things, but this is our vision. And then from that, they built, sort of an understanding of what our needs were. And we do the same thing in manufacturing. So we're in the process of finalizing a huge expansion. We're going to be building. We're putting out a tender probably within 30 days to put up another 210,000 square feet of factory and warehouse. New lines, new production technology, giving us capacity for things that will take us from the water and the soft drinks in plastic to new formats, new package types, new capabilities in terms of we'll be able to do 100% juice we'll be able to do eventually beer, etc. So the plan is, as we move, we sit down and we do all kinds of financial models, and we understand, what. So right now there's a team who's working on what is the products that we want to manufacture, pricing in the market. So we'll come back and say these are the prices. So there's a tremendous amount of work that and then you have to look at, from a cash flow perspective, how are you going to finance it? What are you going to do? Some debt, some equity. And you sit down and come back with a model that says, this is the expected payback, this is the worst case scenario, and and then you determine whether or not it's. I mean, over the years, we've made investments we thought were huge, and looking back at it now, they were tiny in comparison to some of the stuff we're doing now.
Right.
It's a part of maturing of any business.
Sure. One of the things that we see happening is for the last few quarters, at least the last 2 quarters, and we alluded to it in some of our discussion here, is a reduction or contraction in some spaces.
Right.
And business owners at that point and leaders have to make decisions about how do I deploy my capital, what are the decisions that I need to make. And one of the things I'm seeing happening from my perspective is that when the business used to have 10 projects that they're trying to execute, they're more narrowing and focusing. Is that the right thing to be doing in a pandemic, or how do you navigate this period, which is a lot of uncertainty?
I think that is really the crucial word, the uncertainty. Because the reality is none of us really know how much longer. I mean, if you listen to some people, they'll tell you that there's going to be a vaccine next month. Mm-hmm. And then you want to understand, well, are you going to trust that vaccine?
Yeah.
And if you're not sure about the science behind the vaccine development and then the production on a wide-scale basis and district. So the truth is, in all of our projections now, we're anticipating that we will be under similar conditions like this for at least another 18 months.
Right.
Whether or not that means that there's still going to be some opening up of the tourism markets. But the reality is, I think everybody has to accept that this is in the short term. I know it's a short term, 18 months is short term, is, the country's economy can't stop.
Right.
And recently, the president of the GMEA came out and said that the COVID is not a cockroach. Mm-hmm. In other words, why do we need to shut the economy down at 8 o'clock every night?
Right.
I mean, people think it's because of parties or clubs or bars, but the reality is it's not. What it is there are implications for people in the agricultural sector, there are implications for manufacturing and distribution, people in restaurant business, supermarket business. All of these businesses are having a hard time even keeping pace with these shorter hours.
Sure.
And so I think, we're going to have to come to the realization that we can't, if we keep operating with these shorter hours and, yes, we have to have public health and safety first, but that means people have to wear masks in the closed environments. People have to be aware of social distancing, of washing hands and sanitizing. I mean, I've never washed my hands so much in my entire life.
Yes.
I mean, I go through, alcohol. I could drink a bottle every day with the amount of sanitizer I use.
Yes.
But it's just a temporary set of measures that we have to follow in order to ensure health and safety. Really not for the younger people, but for the older people.
Sure.
We're going to have to live through it, and we're going to have to just accept that the economy needs to start really reopening.
Right. Wonderful. We see what is happening with particular businesses that are smaller businesses.
Right.
32% of businesses, this is from Gartner research in the US, are now seeing a situation where they have had to shift full-time employment to some kind of contractual or gig or project base. Is that a major shift that you think is here to stay in terms of how people are managed within an organization?
So there's a few things that I think will be permanent. When I say permanent, like we'll see them 10 years from now. One of them is going to be, there's going to be a lot less people working in offices. My daughter, for example, she works with Macy's. Their head office is right near Times Square in New York. And she worked in an office, but she was doing a lot of their online. She manages a number of their the portfolio for beauty and stuff.
Sure.
And she's been sent home since March or April, and she's now working from Jamaica at home. She's going back up to start thinking about finding an apartment again in New York, because their office is not reopening until early next year. But one of the things that I've come to realize is that those big office buildings in places like New Kingston or New York or in Toronto, anywhere you go, in any major city, you're going to find less and less demand for that. So people work more from home, and a lot of the, like today I was speaking to our head of IT. I wanted to try and get some laptops for some school students. And I said, do we have any old laptops around the place? And he said, unfortunately, because the whole office is now working from home, basically. They've given out all the laptops, so we had no, So that's a new reality. That's going to continue. Businesses that support, like the internet delivery services. So like the Amazons are going to continue to explode. Grocery delivery businesses, anybody who's in the internet and the supply side. The benefit for companies like ours is on the operations and supply. Somebody has to deliver that final, and that's one of the things, like I see long term, we are going to probably offer home delivery service.
Sure.
So we will have the ability, right now we service 15,000 customers. Right. But, one day I see us as a company being able to have the ability to service 600,000 homes,
right.
And basically do what most of the other companies like the Amazons and the Apples of this world, where they eliminate, or not eliminate, but they basically supplement their margin through direct-to-consumer, sales. And I think that's the future for a lot of companies to survive.
Are Jamaican corporate leaders learning that fast enough and making the adjustment and the retooling?
Not every business can do it. In other words, if you're selling chicken, it's going to be hard for you to sell directly to people's homes. But in our business, because of the nature of the products, I think we can do it. Yeah. And we also have such a diverse portfolio that I think it adds the capabilities.
Shifting a little bit again, your philanthropic work is well known. You're involved in so many.
I don't speak about it, so I know.
But it's well known for people who are looking.
Yeah.
Is that an important element of what you do? Is it how important is that giving back to you?
Yeah, it is. I mean, to be honest with you, I guess it's a part of the values. Another thing that I speak of a lot in the company and to the teams when I do speak to them is, if you have to have faith, and it's important to have faith, because if you have faith, it gives you reason for being. Life is not about just coming here and being on the earth and accumulating things. That's not what it's all about. And so once you have sort of at the foundation faith, and I think we do as a family, that's been a big area. One of the biggest things that I think our family is proud of is the establishment of Food for the Poor,
right,
which was founded by my father and his three brothers about 35 years ago. And that organization has been really a huge sort of, filling the gaps in the needs of poor people in Central America and the Caribbean. So throughout Honduras, Guatemala, Nicaragua, El Salvador, in the most needy communities, they do homes, they do a lot of, support for like fishing villages and farming and agricultural projects. In Jamaica as well, they've done thousands and thousands of homes, tens of thousands of homes.
Yeah.
And in Haiti, they were the single largest developer of homes after the earthquake. Yeah. So they've done tremendous work, and I serve on the board locally. I do a number of other projects, but I mean, I think if I would say there's one single, body of philanthropic work that I would be most proud of, it would be Food for the Poor.
Tremendous. Tremendous. Yeah. You work in a family business. You've benefited from your father's mentorship. How important is mentorship in growing, in learning, in developing?
I think it's critical. When I started in the business in the 80s, my uncle, who was then chairman, I worked very closely with him, and he mentored me. I used to sit in on meetings with him. it got to the point where people actually thought I was his son.
Okay.
And because of that, over the last, I would say 15 years, I've done a lot of that mentoring myself as well with young business people. I've done a few sessions, quite a few sessions with like the Branson Center.
Yeah.
We have a group of young entrepreneurs through a youth group in St. Catherine. I've done a number of sessions there. I've had a number of young entrepreneurs, sons of customers who have said, our daughters have said, I would like to get some advice, and I will take them and give. That's how you pass on, hopefully, the best practices and teach people to become good leaders.
Sure, wonderful. You have also gotten involved in the venture capital space. I remember pitching to you when Tyrone and I was negotiating a merger. Why was that a thing that you think, I want to also
at the time I was doing it because of my desire to try and help young entrepreneurs. The truth is that it was I didn't stay very long in that organization, but I still do the work. And I do it more sort of privately. That was in a more public forum.
Sure.
So I still do a lot of the entrepreneurial sort of mentoring that I always have done, or at least in the last 15 years or so.
Sure. In business life, what are some of the most important lessons do you think that you have taken from your father, from your uncle, from the other people who have influenced you?
Just last week actually I was talking to my father. He's retired. He's been retired for some time, but he's also this year he'll be stepping down from the board of the company. And I said to him, there's so many areas that we didn't agree. Many of them as a result of generational differences.
Right.
But as we work together, we work very closely together for 25 years. I came to the realization that his principles and his values, his moral compass was, it's like I said to people, if my father told you that the sky is brown, don't even bother look outside. Right. The sky is brown.
Yes.
You don't have to question it. And so those sort of fundamental values and ethical principles that he lived by is something that I really hold dearly. And then with my uncle, who I also work very closely with, his ability to understand the needs of consumers. Like from the very beginning, he used to say to me, you need to, the business is not in the office. Mm-hmm. The business is in the supermarket or on the road. Go out there, talk to the customers, talk to the consumers. And growing up as a young business person, I spent weekends, Saturdays, Sundays in the supermarkets or going out to small wholesalers and asking them what was it that they needed or what. And that's how I saw some of the brands' opportunities, the business opportunities, and that's how we grew over time. Was through that.
Wonderful. A lot of people know entrepreneurship is the new buzzword. Everybody wants to start a business. Yeah. If you were starting, where would you be looking? If you were saying
today,
today, if you were starting a business, where are the sectors that you say, hey, this is an interesting play? Is manufacturer still a good place?
Yes, definitely. People have to eat.
Yeah.
I think probably I would say the real area of opportunity in the long term is going to be in the logistics. Somebody is going to produce it, and they have to get it to the consumer. Right. So, finishing the gap between the manufacturer or the farmer and the consumer, that's a big opportunity. And I think that over time, you'll see whole industries just boom and blossom out of that.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
I think I explored this with Jeffrey a little bit, and the idea, especially in a business in Jamaican context, business has a lot of effect on the Jamaican landscape.
Yes.
Because the reality as a small economy, business has a tremendous role for good, for movement of policy, for movement of where we want our country to be going.
Yeah.
Do you consciously seek to think about how you can positively impact?
Yeah.
And are you kind of putting that into how do you do that?
So I think for me the biggest area of how I have approached it was in my participation with the PSOJ. So in 2015, I decided that I was going, against all my better judgment. I had a number of my own personal mentors who called me and said, "You need to do this because there is so much that you need to impress upon the private sector, the leaders in the private sector, of the importance of agriculture and manufacturing."
Right.
We have historically the PSOJ has been led by people primarily in the financial sector.
Yes.
So at the very top, they look at things differently. They look at macroeconomics, and they don't necessarily understand the needs of some of the small people, and even you've heard people say that the PSOJ stands for the privileged sons of Jamaica. I don't know if you ever heard
Yes,
that.
I've heard.
So the reality is, a lot of my contemporaries felt that me getting into that organization would bring a little bit more sort of grassroots feel to it.
Sure.
And I didn't get a chance to finish the full term because of our fire in 2016. But I think it created a new opportunity for me to participate in a dialogue, policy discussion. Arising out of that, we created tremendous collaborative arrangements between the private sector, the government, and civil society. Some of it had been started by the previous president, Chris Zaka, and we expanded on it, and we created, a lot of tremendous vehicles. I sat on the very beginning of ESET,
Yes.
which was the electrical sector enterprise team, which put in place the framework for the investment in new energy capacity in Jamaica, and is going to help to bring down energy costs in the country. We had the EPOC, which is the policy committee that was basically designed to monitor the government's economic program, and I sat on that committee as well. So what you saw developing was this more collaborative approach with the private sector and the government, which allowed more dialogue, policy making. In the right after COVID, in the immediate aftermath, the private sector organization, currently the president is Keith Duncan.
Yes.
He had the opportunity to bring on board a group of advisors, past presidents and other private sector leaders, who assisted to build the team that the Prime Minister put together of the task force.
Yes.
And so I was on that task force along with Keith, a number of ministers of government, and basically identify some of the steps that we would need to take as a country to ensure the economy is not going to, have severe fallout.
Sure.
I mean, we're having fallout. We're going to continue to have fallout, but what are the steps we would need? And so a lot of the policy decisions that arose out of those meetings and the document, I think should guide us out of this mess in the next year and a half.
Tremendous. There's so much other things to explore, but we have to kind of wrap up. I'll spend the other few minutes that we have talking
Sure.
about small businesses.
Yes.
And how small a person who is really maybe now in the cottage industry, but really looking forward to growing and scaling. What lessons would you? So there's a small producer, somebody who's thinking about a product.
Right.
His grandmother has a recipe from 30 years ago. So what lessons? What do you say to those?
The first thing that I say to young and small business, who are beginning, is focus on, if it's a service or a product, focus on a very narrow view. People sometimes think it's counterintuitive, but the reality is, if you were to say, okay, I am going to make gizzardo, I have a recipe that handed down from my mother or whatever, and I'm going to become the very, very best manufacturer of Gizada in Jamaica. And then you produce it to a certain standard, you package it so that it is the finest looking product. And then you work to, because eventually you'll get the distribution. Right. You know, if you get it to a certain point, then Wisynco or Grace Kennedy or somebody will say, okay, I want to distribute this product through my network. And at that point, you will become, you could become a Gizada giant.
Right.
And you have the opportunities to then send it overseas, to export it. And so I always say to small business people, don't believe that you have to be doing, you know, online and you have to be doing manufacturing and maybe, you know, you want to get into a car rental business. Because what happens is you take your all of your capital, your emotional, your mental, and your physical capital, and you're you know, spreading it over a very wide cross section of different. You have to have a different capacity to think about one business versus another. Focus on the business that you're strong at, good at, become the very best, and over time you'll then be able to grow. I mean, tremendously. And Wisynco started that way. Yeah. In other words, we were plastics, and then we had other businesses which were really not doing much, and then we eventually said, okay, we want to become a beverage company, and in 1996, and you know, sometimes I have to pinch myself because I remember 1996, we started the factory with about 70 people. And fast forward to today, we had one line which was doing about 1 million cases a year. Fast forward to today, and the beverage business of Wisynco, the total beverage business is somewhere around 35 million cases a year. And we have, you know, 10 production lines.
Oh,
so
tremendous.
You can do it.
Yeah.
I mean, investment, the whole investment for that factory in 1995 was $2.5 million US.
Right.
We will buy one piece of machine now, which is, you know, multiples of that, right, which not even doing, I mean, so it's just a matter of being very, very focused.
Sure. For the other big thing that emerging businesses grapple with, certainly in the Jamaican context, is access to capital.
Yes.
What needs to happen, and I see it a lot of times because our business is more oriented towards emerging businesses, right, or emerging brands. And I talk to a lot of businesses that say, hey, we know we have a good product, right, we're concentrating on excellence, but the capital is not there. Yeah. And yes, we have financial institutions, but just the rigor and the work, yeah, of going and negotiating, and by the time I spend 3 weeks trying to get to where I need to go there, I've lost an opportunity. Yeah. What needs to happen for us to be much more nimble for our small businesses to get to market?
So I think what you're going to start to see is institutions coming up that are going to become quasi-private equity. Yeah. And that's happening already. Yeah. You know, you're starting to see the likes of, you know, Cygnus and Barita and some of these entities that are, a lot of them are going to be flush with capital. Right. And what they have no choice but to deploy it, because on the liability side, they're going to have to find a way to pay their investment. The people who are investing with them, they're going to have to give them some return. Right. Similarly, on the banking side, what you're seeing now is the banks are running out of blue chip companies. Right. You know, we don't need any more cash right now to borrow. You know,
I'm sure bankers are calling.
Yeah, I mean, you know, if Jeffrey and Jamaica Producers, similarly, the Grace Kennedys, all of those companies don't really need more money to borrow. Right. And so they're going to run out of customers, but they still have all the deposits. Right. Now there's only one or two things. They can stop paying interest on the deposits, which you're starting to see them come down, or they can start to become a little bit more aggressive in the market, yeah, and go after small business, you know, loans. You're seeing more of that. So Scotiabank, Jamaica National, a number of institutions, NCB as well, are looking at micro and small lending, micro and small enterprise lending. That's going to continue to happen, and it will evolve, where the level of risk, appetite for risk, is going to grow just because of the need for the banking and the financial institutions to have, on the asset side, people who they feel can you know, give them some kind of return. And then the other thing is that even investors, private investors now, I mean, I know, for example, like outside of Wisynco, I have a number of other investments I'm looking at just because I see good opportunities. And so small businesses are going to find that there are private investors who will come in and take a piece of the action, almost again like private equity, but this time it's just a one-on-one relationship rather than through an investment firm.
Tremendous.
So I think it's the timing is good if you're going to the market to seek capital. Then you have stock exchange, junior stock exchange, and you're talking about a micro stock exchange. So hopefully that materializes.
William, thank you very much for talking to me.
Pleasure. It was really, I'm happy that I came and did this.
Wonderful, tremendous conversation. Guys, thank you for tuning in to Digital Housing 2020. We have learned so much about, from Founders Chair with Kalila and Yuan, looking at how they started and how they have grown businesses directly online, tremendous growth. And this is just their first year of operation. We looked at with Zachary about capital and how we raise capital and the importance of a business model, a customer acquisition strategy. We talked to Dwayne Samuels, a Jamaican who left Jamaica, went to Silicon Valley, built a network and just closed $2 million in Silicon Valley for a person who is not, who spent most of his life in Jamaica up to university. And we capped it off with two tremendous conversations with Jeffrey Hall and William Mahfood. Thank you for joining us. And if you haven't registered on our website, please go and register. For the persons who registered on our website and has paid the resource fee, all of these conversations will be pre-packaged, and within about a week or so, you'll get an email with all the resources, some of the tools that were mentioned by Catherine, by Lisandra, by Dwayne. All of those things. We'll put together a list, the websites, the resources that you can use to fuel your business. Thank you again for joining us, and have a wonderful rest of the year. I think it's still a good year to succeed. And as Yuan said, if you're thinking about starting something, why not?
Yeah, good time.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right.
Pleasure. Absolutely.